Hello, everyone. My name is Calev Ben-Dor. I'm joined by my fellow deputy editor, Jack, and we are particularly excited to have Hanin Ghaddar with us. Hanin is a fellow at the Washington Institute. Um, she's actually one of, if not my go-to person about kind of Lebanese domestic politics, etc. So we're super excited to have her with us for this Fathom conversation. Hanin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So we are, I mean, this is quite a live situation. We're recording on Monday evening UK and Israel time, the 20th. Hopefully this will go up in the next couple of days or so. But obviously the situation's changing the whole time. Hanin, what I'm particularly interested in, obviously Hezbollah have got these different considerations. On the one hand, they're this integral part of the resistance axis against Israel, but they're also a kind of an insurance for Iran, or their weapons are, their 150,000 missiles, etc., are this insurance for Iran if Israel were to attack Iran's nuclear sites. That's kind of another role it has. It's or certainly wants to be, this legitimate Lebanese organization that have an important role in Lebanon. And there's also American warships in the region. What do you think how should we understand Hezbollah's considerations at the moment, and where, not asking you to predict, but your analysis of kind of the last month and the next month, if you like? What might we expect?
What do we expect is the difficult question. Like, I can look at the past month and analyze and think of, based on what has been happening since October 7, what Hezbollah and Iran's calculations are. So we're going to do that, but of course anything can change any moment, because this is the war, and the margin for miscalculations and mistakes is growing every day. And one day, if the wrong target is hit, civilians die, major number of civilians die, and then the war break, because I think Israel is definitely more ready for a preemptive strike against Hezbollah than Hezbollah is ready to attack Israel at this point. But both do not really want to engage in this war right now. Let me just start by saying the difference here. What you say, like Hezbollah's missions, right? They have so many missions. And it's an integral part of their identity, of their DNA. It's the difference between Hamas and other groups in the region. I mean, the difference between Hezbollah and other groups in the region, particularly Hamas at this point, is that Hezbollah's family. Hezbollah is part of the IRGC Quds Force. It's an integral, organic part of the Quds Force. It's part of the system. It is part of the hierarchy. They know that they cannot function on their own. They do not have the leverage to take the decisions of war and peace on their own, especially this kind of war that might expand into a regional war. They know that this is something that cannot be taken without considering Iran's interests. So they are part of the system. Hamas is not. Hamas is a proxy. Iran has many proxies in the region, some clients, some proxies, and some debate whether Hamas is actually a client or a proxy. But Iran, the IRGC has tons of proxies and clients in the region. But none of them really is as integral to the IRGC as Hezbollah is. And that's the difference between Hamas and Hezbollah. When Hezbollah started, it started as part of the IRGC. Actually, it started in Lebanon by the IRGC. It was founded by the IRGC as part of their regional outreach before 82, like Hezbollah's establishment date. It was founded immediately in 1979 after the Islamic Revolution in Iran. Immediately, the Iranians send their officers to Lebanon to start organizing for Hezbollah. And its mission at the beginning was basically to domestically to turn Lebanon into Islamic State, but this has faded eventually when they realized it's much more complicated, much more difficult. And at the end of the day, the real objective is not that. The real objective is to take over the decisions of the Lebanese state. So they don't really need to turn it into an Islamic State, but they managed to take over, to hijack Lebanon's security and military decisions. But mainly, they realized that the Shia community in Lebanon is very vulnerable. And there was the occupation of Israel in 1982, and it turned out that it's a great tool. The Palestinian cause has a very deep rooting in the Arab culture. You know, like the main cause of the Arab world is the Palestinian cause, which has changed later, and we'll talk about that. It's really shifted with Syria and Iraq and Lebanon. Like, the Arab world is not really invested in the Palestinian cause anymore, but in 1982 it was. So that was a great raison d'etre for their establishment. And to do that, they had to take over the resistance narrative, the anti-Israeli narrative, the pro-Palestinian narrative. And they found themselves as the leaders of the resistance in Lebanon that represented the attitude of the Arab street against Israel and pro-Palestine. But this has shifted drastically since 1982. Hezbollah engaged in, their main mission was to resist Israel, to be part of the war against Israel in 1982, all the way to 96, to 2000 liberation, and then, of course, to the 2006 war, which it ended with Hezbollah claiming a divine victory, whatever that means, because for many Lebanese like us, it was not a victory, it was a major loss. So basically, after 2006, things really started to change. Their role has shifted from being the front at the front line of the war against Israel to be Iran's main arm, military and security and logistical arm in the region, basically taking over the 4 Arab states and beyond in order to really accomplish the objective of taking the decision-making in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, etc., you know, like, and beyond. They had to reallocate the resources from the south of Lebanon all the way deeper into the region, and they became much more engaged in securing Iran's foothold in these Arab states, and they succeeded to a certain extent in taking over these 4 countries, and they claimed it. The Iranians claimed it, and they became Iran's main army in the region rather than Iran's army at the Lebanese-Israeli border. They wanted both. They really want to be doing both. They want to be also, but, you know, like, taking over this decision, this made them also, their mission shifted into internally in Lebanon in terms of allocating also the resources to take over the Lebanese state, to take over Lebanese institutions, and to take over everything that would help them hijack the decision in Lebanon, suppress the dissidents, make sure that the opposition is eliminated either by assassinating the opposition or using their arms against the Lebanese people, which is not a surprise that right after the 2006, their arms turned inward. And in May 7 events of 2008, only immediately after 2006, they moved their arms inward and staged this May 7 event, which basically, for the first time, Hezbollah used their arms against non-Israelis, against Arab people, against Lebanese people, and then afterwards they started moving them to the rest of the region. So this is how they're shifted. They really want to be all. They want to be the Lebanese strong political party. They want to be the resistance. They want to be Iran's arm in the region, but they cannot do all. At the end of the day, the resources are stretched enough, and Iran is under so much economic and financial pressure that they cannot really fulfill Hezbollah's missions across all these fronts. So they had to sacrifice something. So today, their main objective remains, the region remains to protect Iran's interest in the region and Iran's internal infrastructure, mainly the nuclear facilities. And Iran will not sacrifice Hezbollah at all in order to protect Hamas or to protect the the Palestinians, or to fight the Israelis. For Iran, Hezbollah is the most valuable asset. And if they get engaged in the war and lose their own assets, that is the Radwan forces, the precision missiles that they've been working very long and hard in order to produce them, or to really exhaust their resources, Iran thinks that it will be sacrificing a very valuable asset for a proxy or a client like Hamas or for the Palestinians. That's a big no. Their asset is much more important. For Hezbollah, it's a dilemma. I think Hezbollah is facing the most complicated dilemma ever, because despite what happens in Syria and the criticism that they received from the Arab world, because they went to Syria to defend Bashar al-Assad and killed actually Syrians, today they are, when Hassan Nasrallah spoke for the first time 2 Fridays ago in order to tell the most anticipated speech of Hassan Nasrallah, he basically, after a week of anticipation and trailers and teasers telling the world that he's going to say something big, he came out and basically said a number of things, but mainly that told Hamas that you are on your own, that we're not coming to your rescue, although they promised a united front, and basically said that the united front is shattered. There's no united front. It's not that united. You thought it's united. It's not really united. 2, they said that we are not part of the Free Palestine campaign anymore. You do it. We have a different job. And 3, he reassured his own constituency, which is losing it, because Hezbollah is also really dealing with a very vulnerable constituency, which is today no longer, which today no longer sees Hezbollah as the divine savior. They see him as a political party, a protector to a certain extent, but really not a divine savior. The attitude to Hezbollah has shifted, and we can talk more about this. Hezbollah today is not ready for war. They can do the Syria, they can fight Iran's battles in the region. They can do whatever they can in order to protect Iran, and Iran will use them if they feel that their own interests, their own assets are under attack. But Hezbollah definitely do not want to engage in war today because they are not ready for different reasons. One of the main reasons why they're not ready for war is that they do not have the war budget. They can't really engage in war. We can talk about their finances a lot and how they're making money today and why Iran cannot really provide the same amount of money, and that their resources is allocated in the region today. But they definitely do not have the war budget. They do not have, they do not have the guarantees for reconstruction. In 2006, they had a lot of guarantees from Iran, and they knew that the Arab world is going to come for compensation. They went into a war knowing that the bags of money of US dollars would be coming to Lebanon. But most importantly, I think, is after really the most important factor, which is the budget, another important factor is the commandment, the military commandment. Their last victory in 2006 was declared by Imad Maghniye, who actually really achieved Hezbollah's victories. Hezbollah's legacies are built on this person. Imad Maghniye is Hezbollah's legacy. It's not Hassan Nasrallah, it's Imad Maghniye. Imad Maghniye, when he was killed, he was replaced by Mustafa Badruddin, who really did not fill the shoes of Imad Maghniye, and Mustafa Badruddin challenged Qasim Soleimani, who killed him. We know that Qasim Soleimani himself got rid of Mustafa Badruddin and made sure that after him, no one was appointed to lead the military commandment of Hezbollah. So Qasim Soleimani wanted to be the de facto commander of Hezbollah because he was very much in his mentality. He was that kind of micromanager who wanted to take all the decisions for Hezbollah. The upside of this for him was that he now can take all the decisions without anyone challenging him. The downside is that when he was killed himself, Khani did not fill these shoes. So there's no one really to lead the battle today. There are a lot of junior commanders who can do smaller battles in Syria and Iraq and Yemen, you name it. But they cannot really lead a commandment. They really cannot command a war against Israel or a regional war for that sake. their own military fighting force is shattered as well. The Radwan brigade is still very good. They have all the resources they need. They're trained, they're ideological, they're disciplined. They are very elite in that sense. But the rest, really, they have an issue of quantity over quality. The quality, the Radwan forces and some other brigades are good, but the majority of Hezbollah's fighting force are young people who have zero experience in any war with Israel or any operations in the south. Either they fought in Syria or other places, or they did just like some military training that did not really prepare them for a war of that scale. So there are many reasons why Hezbollah is not ready, but they also know that once their long range and heavy missiles and precision missiles per se, once they use them, they will lose them, because Iran is not going to be able to compensate Hezbollah's infrastructure the way they did in 2006. So today they had to sacrifice a lot of their legitimacy. Hassan Nasrallah, basically, another thing he said in his speech is that he is no longer the resistance, that he basically himself single-handedly destroyed the resistance rhetoric. It was destroyed in Syria. It was destroyed after the maritime border deal. It was destroyed in 2019 when they cracked down on the demonstrators in Lebanese street. It was destroyed in many phases, but his speech was the last really slap to the resistance face, because he totally said that we are no longer part of freeing Palestine. What they're doing today is trying to save some face by saying, you know, like, we will keep, you know, you want to be part of the war, but they don't want to be part of the war at the same time. So today, this is what they're saying, you know, like, we don't want to be part of the war, so we're keeping to the borders, we're keeping our targets as military, we're keeping, you know, like, everything without really risking a war. So they are part of the war in one way or another, but they're not. So they also want to try to win, but it's not working. No one is buying them seriously. And the problem, they, yes, do not want to go to war, but they want to, like, always keep that front busy in order to distract the Israelis from you know, like, focusing totally on Gaza, to have, you know, like, a lot of attention on the Lebanese border. But they also are facing a predicament, knowing that, yes, Israel wanted to have a preemptive strike on Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the US actually prevented it. And today, Amos Hochstein is in Israel in order to make sure that the Israelis do not engage in a preemptive, larger scale preemptive strike against Hezbollah. They know that the Israelis are ready, and that's why they're worried and very calculated. Another thing they know is that after this is over, at one point, the Gaza war will be over. And at one point, this deterrence strategy that really was set in 2006 and worked until the very, very, very end, especially now they're trying to tell everyone that we want to keep this deterrence strategy, that it's still working, but they know that for the Israelis, it has been shattered. The deterrence strategy with Hamas has been shattered, and they know that at one point when Hezbollah is ready, when Iran makes the decision, that Hezbollah will break this deterrence and will infiltrate and go for war with Israel. Not now, but at one point will. So Israel will eventually do a preemptive strike, and they know that. And this is where the risk grows, because this awareness, this fear, this concern that Hezbollah has might drive them to be much more aggressive against the Israelis, but they do not want this war to start by Iran. Like, they do not want to start this war themselves, because they also will face a serious backlash by the Lebanese and the Shia community per se, because they will blame them for the war. So they're just like waiting. They're basically sitting ducks now, waiting for the Israelis to make a decision to bomb them.
Thank you, Hanin. Several questions spring to mind following that. I mean, the first would be, do you think Hamas has been surprised by Nasrallah's caution? In other words, do you think Hamas went into October 7th thinking that the call to join the fight would be answered?
Yes, I think they were surprised. They made statements about it because they were promised a united front. In April 2023, earlier this year in April, the Ismail Haniyeh was in Beirut. The Iranians were there, and they met with Hassan Nasrallah. They all had a meeting, and afterwards, actually publicly, they declared the establishment of a joint operation room. And then after the establishment of a joint operation room, they started talking about the United Front and how the United Front is going to be the thing from now on, that any assault is really assault against, like one of these people who are part of this United Front, it will have to face the whole United Front. And I think what happened, and then they started this whole escalation of tension on the borders between Lebanon and Israel. There was a period, a couple of months, where Hezbollah was upping the tension on the border with a lot more strikes, taking the tents, the infiltration. A number of things happened in the past in the 2 months, a couple of months preceding October 7, and it's believed that this was kind of a distraction by Hezbollah to get Israelis to be distracted from what's happening in Gaza. And I think it worked because there was a coordination. I'm pretty sure that the coordination was there. Hamas would not do this without at least a minimal kind of coordination. So everything was building up by Hezbollah to lead for Hamas to start its operation in the south. So once this started, Hamas was expecting Hezbollah to follow up and continue from, it's move from escalation to full-scale war. And they were calling, actually, Daif was Hamas military commander, the Daif Abu Ubaidah, was basically calling everyone in the West Bank and in Gaza to join the operation. And he was actually expecting Hezbollah to do that as well, from all fronts, united front, let's do it. Hezbollah was planning, actually, I believe that Hezbollah and the Iranians were planning to overwhelm Israel from different places, from the Golan Heights, because there are many indications that the Iranians, the RGC, was mobilizing a lot of forces in Syria to go to the Golan Heights, and it was obvious that the number of Iranian proxies on the Golan Heights was increasing drastically the first week, and they were moving the Radwan forces and others to the north, to the south of Lebanon on the borders of Israel. The indications were there that they were really mobilizing, meaning that they were ready to not necessarily infiltrate or start a full-scale war, but definitely to join the war in some grand manner in order to overwhelm Israel. And I think this was a miscalculation. What Hamas did, Hamas had its own miscalculation with the hostages. They thought taking in hundreds of hostages will deter Israel. That was a miscalculation. The Iranians' miscalculation was the American response. And I think what shifted their plans, regarding the United Front, what shattered the United Front is the American response. It wasn't shattered by the Iranians, it was shattered by the US deployment in the region and the US statements saying that the US will be part and respond to Iranian Hezbollah attack on Israel. And this made the Iranians start talking about, not saying directly that the United Front is shattered, but saying basically what Hassan Nasrallah said on his first speech. During his speech, he said, this is a Palestinian battle. We will help, but it's their battle. This is purely a Palestinian decision. This is purely a Palestinian battle. Iran had no idea. It was a reaction to the American deployment, but this means that to avoid that kind of scenario, the U.S. needs to continue not just with the deployment, the seriousness of its messaging regarding Iran and Hezbollah.
Thank you, Hanin. One final question, which really is a domestic Lebanese question, which is, and you've sort of hinted at it in two of the previous answers. What are the sort of elements of public opinion in Lebanon surrounding Hezbollah's posture, surrounding surrounding attitude, wider Lebanese attitudes to Israel, and how much is that a factor in Hezbollah, I think?
Yes. Listen, I think no one wants the war. This is the premise, like even Hezbollah itself, but its own constituency, if anything happens, the Shia will pay the heaviest price, obviously, because they will die. They will, like the Palestinians today are paying the price for Hamas actions. The Shia will pay the price, and that's really another kind of deterrence. But no one wants the war. The Lebanese, I think the Lebanese public, the Lebanese community is very much divided over what's happening in Gaza, right? No one likes Hamas, obviously, except Hezbollah's guys. They are the ones who like Hamas. But mostly, I think because Lebanon is very much diverse, there isn't like one majority community in Lebanon. It's much more complicated than the rest of the Arab world today. The street is definitely divided, more divided than any Arab state, I think. On maybe Syria's attitude is a little bit calmer when it or like more obviously anti-Hamas, because they've been there, they know what it means. But Lebanon is definitely divided, and it's not divided along sectarian lines. Definitely not. It's divided along people who actually realize that this is always an Iran's strategy to win over Arab blood, basically. People have realized today, mostly the Christians in Lebanon are not concerned because they are not there. They're not in the south. They've never been concerned. But also a number of Lebanese, you don't hear the silent majority, because it's not easy to say this if you are in Lebanon. It's easier today to say this when you're out and you're not going back. But you only hear the loud voices that are allowed to speak. You don't hear the silent majority. The silent majority realize that Iran, for the past 40 years, have been winning and achieving certain political successes or achievements over Arab blood, over the Palestinian blood, over our blood as Lebanese, over Iraqi blood, Syrian blood. We are dying. We are spilling blood and losing people for Iran to win. And this is a big no today for a lot of people in Lebanon, especially, and I would say mostly for people in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. People who actually experienced this, people who actually died and spilled blood for Iran to win, realize this more than other people in the Arab world. Like, you see the reactions in the streets of Egypt and Jordan and other countries are much more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, and more and Arabs in America, for example, and Europe are much more enthusiastic about Hamas actions than people in Lebanon and Syria, for example, because we know what that means. We know that we are being sacrificed for Iran's political achievements and Iran's power. This is not our war. This is not about Palestinian causes. This is not about Palestinian rights. This is about Iran. So this is how we are divided.
Well, Hanin, just so many fascinating things that you said about, firstly about the silent majority, about how the split is not sectorial, which was very interesting, about how kind of the US presence has really been stabilizing both on the Israeli side. There's been reports about that, which you mentioned in the Israeli press, but also on the Hezbollah side. So thank you so much. I mean, there's so much else we could talk about. There's, as you mentioned, Israel will not be going back to what was before in the north. There's, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands, probably over 100,000 Israelis from the north who've been evacuated, who probably not going to want to go home if the Radwan units are just there. But that will have to be for another conversation.
Happy to talk more in depth, more perfect. To go in depth more into these topics at another time. And
lovely. We'll hold you to that. Hanin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Hanin.
Bye.
Bye.